Education is a privilege. It is not a human basic right. A human basic right would be those inalienable rights that God gave us, which was freedom, ability to think, ability to act on our own, to, use the skills that He gave us, to go the places that He had for us with food and water and shelter. Well, the reason why I'm against school choice as it's being spun, and that is the more subsidized it is, the more controlled that it is. And that's the danger.
Classical Conversation Studios presents Refining Rhetoric with CEO Robert Bortons, a podcast where faith, business, politics, and classical education meet. Join us as we use the classical tools of rhetoric to seek truth in every arena of life.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Refining Rhetoric. Today my guest is Lynn Taylor. Lynn is a retired private home educator with over 20 years of experience. Lynn's research has received praise for accuracy, truth, wit, wisdom, and documentation, and her award-winning writing and outspoken activism and advocacy are priceless to anyone seeking to navigate corrupt government policies and their impact on your family. Lynn, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Robert. It is wonderful to be with you today, as well as your lovely audience.
Lynn, for those who don't know, you kind of came onto the scene and started your activism as the Common Core diva, and I remember when the Common Core was all the rage. Explain to us, how did you get into that? What is your mission in life? And just love to hear how you got here today.
Oh, well, thank you so much for asking. It's quite a story, actually. I was blessed when we moved to North Carolina from Florida to find a wonderful homeschooling community over in Raleigh. And I currently live near Charlotte now, but back in the day, I really didn't know who to talk to. And I met this wonderful lady. She became my mentor. And, as my girls were getting up in age, I wanted to find out, what is Common Core? Does it have anything to do with outside of public education? And if so, how's it going to impact? And, I've been able to be in leadership in that community for many years, support group leader-wise, mentor-wise. And so I felt in good conscience that I needed to not only prepare my children for what was out there, but others who were under my shepherding, if you will. And so I really got into it when I found two articles. One was by Tom DeWeese, and it was the push for the UN and globalization of American education. And then the other was Kathy Duffy, and she is a wonderful reviewer for homeschool curriculum, very well respected. And she was also talking about the dangers that were ahead for homeschooling should Common Core become the law of the land. And, here we are supposedly, every student succeeds at killed Common Core, but actually it cemented it. And so the end goal of Common Core is to have that one cookie cutter education for cradle to grave, to hurry up to learn so you can hurry up to earn, not to better yourself, not to be who God made you to be or to use the skills and gifts He gave you, but to fit a government mold of who you should be, where you should work, where you should live. And it's so egregious to our freedoms and our individuality.
Yeah, so Common Core, a lot of families, even with young kids, might think that was a thing of the past, and that's been changed, it's been abandoned. But as you've pointed out, it hasn't been. So what was, through your research and what you discovered, what was really the purpose of Common Core, and how is it still affecting, not just government education, but our education systems here in the U.S.?
Well, it's really interesting, Robert, because the whole goal was never for it to be just about our school subjects. This was a way to come in and indoctrinate the most number of people that you possibly could at one single time, because education and school puts you in a concentrated environment for X number of hours. I don't care where you're going to school, that's pretty much what it is. So that was pretty much the goal. And when Bill Gates back in 2004 signed an agreement with UNESCO, which is the education and scientific arm of the United Nations, to create a one world curriculum tied to one way of learning, one way of testing. This is why we have the mess that we do. And again, that end goal is to make you more of a minion for the state, not the God-fearing, wonderful person that you were intended to be.
Yeah, so speak to, because people have probably heard of the UN and the United Nations, and if you're conservative, you're probably kind of skeptical of them, and maybe if you're more liberal, you're like, yeah, we need this big group to help keep peace around the world, and of course, the world wars were terrible. But yeah, explain what UNESCO, UNESCO, what is it?
Okay, UNESCO stands for United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. And so, with them being lock, stock, and barrel in with the Declaration for Human Rights, especially for children, where it says, you have a human right to education. I want folks to understand education is a privilege. It is not a human basic right. A human basic right would be those inalienable rights that God gave us, which was freedom, ability to think, ability to act on our own, to, use the skills that He gave us, to go the places that He had for us with food and water and shelter. Those are the inherent rights that we were given. So a human right kind of slaps in the face where they say, well, we're going to come over here and we're going to maybe put in some quasi-God inalienable rights, but then we're going to come over here and we're going to just control the bejeebers out of them, because after all, that's what you do, because you're too stupid to think for yourself. So we're going to groom you on how to think. Therefore, you will trust us with where you live and what you do for a living.
Yeah, so I think we may have seen some of those outcomes play out during COVID, as far as blindly trusting the government. Like, what is the intention of this one world curriculum? Like, how does that really get implemented and put into place, and how that might affect the United States versus like a third world country who doesn't have anyone developing curriculum?
Right, absolutely. And that's a really good question. And one of the ways in which that happens is that you've got, okay, let me back up just a little bit to the Every Student Succeeds Act, because on page 17 of the final conference report, which translates into page 33 of the law that was signed in 2015, which we are still under de facto rule of, said that all education had to be aligned to the same post-secondary readiness standards as laid out in the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So, Robert, right there, it didn't matter if you were in public, private, hybrid, magnet, IB, AP, homeschool, magnet, whatever school you were in, those standards for academics had to be tied to workforce. So we're setting up the Prussian model of skill-based or outcome-based education, which puts you in a slot, as I've said several times already, of where you'll be, what you'll work. That's why we're seeing so many students be streamlined as far as their education, not for academic prowess, but for some sort of job skill. And one of the ways that this is infiltrated into our homeschooling environments as well as our public private schools is because it's a culture-wide move. The Sustainable Development Goals back in, I think it was 1992, that were signed into being. And of course, then it was it was the Millennial Development Goals back then. Anyway, it's gotten a name change and now it's known as Agenda 2030. But the point of it was that when that was brought up, a professor from the University of Tennessee decided, I'm so in love with these Sustainable Development Goals that I'm going to go back to the university and I'm going to write a toolkit. And embedded in that toolkit, which is several hundred pages long, and you can find it on my blog, was the fact that whatever happened in education had to come from a way of being within our states or the United States, as opposed to coming from outside like the United Nations. Because if it came from outside, well, there was no way that we would ever accept it. But if it came and felt like it was coming from our state or our federal government, we might be a little bit more inclined to take it. Well, what happened was woven into those sustainable development goals was using education as the chief change agent, not for schools, but for culture. Because if you indoctrinate the culture and manipulate the culture enough, you will get people to go along like lemmings on what you want to do. And one of the ways that they wanted to insert this was called STEM, or science, technology, engineering, and math. Some private religious schools call it STEAM, which stands for science, technology, engineering, the arts, math. And what happens with STEM and STEAM and even STREAM, because the Catholic churches use that as well, is that the entire set of curriculum is tied to not only Common Core and the One World Government, but to these sustainable development goals. And if you look at these goals, Robert, you're going to see every one of them mocks not only humans as living, breathing, and intelligent beings, but the fact that we don't need God because we are gods.
Well, I think you see that. I did a podcast earlier in 2024 where I talked about a young lady wrote an op-ed saying that she doesn't want to have kids because of global warming. And you hear about people being depressed or anxious or even committing suicide because of the potential of the world going, I guess, too hot, just because they're living and breathing. And so I think, that idea of tying education to cultural change for those who might be kind of skeptical of maybe what you're talking about, we're seeing those results right now, and they were very intentional. They might not have expected children to grow up fearing the world or the weather, but that's the fruit of a pagan worldview that rejects God.
It absolutely is. And I don't think I could have said it any better. And one of the things that people ask me, well, you're against science, you're against technology. No, we've always had science. We've always had a need for technology. But when you label everything in this manner, with this agenda, and then you filter every bit of that science and that engineering and that technology through that agenda, what you're coming out with is, think about a coffee maker. When you put the coffee grounds in the filter, they're nice and dry and they look like coffee. And then when it comes through the filter, and then what's left in the filter is like this sludge. That's what I want you to think of. Because yes, we have science. And if people don't understand this, they need to know that way back when we had our earliest inventors, we had people who were delving into this because they wanted to better understand God's creation, whether it was in space or whether it was about the human body or whether it was just about how nature works. It wasn't until the Renaissance, when humanism came in, that there was this sudden division between science as a form of worship and science as a totally devoid of God. You don't need God. We all came from pond scum kind of stuff. And it has just snowballed since then. And of course, when the United Nations came in with it, their roots are in Luciferian belief. So, of course, they're not going to worship God. I mean, look at the Global Citizen Pledge. You're not pledging to support God or the scripture. You're supporting the planet and everything that goes on in it. You're worshiping creation, not the creator.
If you enjoy listening to the Refining Rhetoric podcast and want to go further in your own education, Classical Conversations has a free summer parent practicum where you can practice the tools of learning with other parents in person for one day. It's kind of like a free one-day homeschool boot camp, and you can go to ccpracticum.com to find out more information. This year, we'll be practicing the tools of learning with math, more specifically talking about the Math Map, one of Classical Conversations' newest and best products that's coming out this year. So you'll want to practice the tools of learning in a group, get a preview of the Math Map that's going to be rolled out, and continue to just become a more practiced, more thorough educator for yourself and for your children and for future generations. So go find out when your local practicum is meeting by visiting ccpracticum.com. That's ccpracticum.com. We'll see you there. Now, let's get back to the show. Yeah, I think what you're saying about STEM too, of course, most of the scientists who invented the different fields that we know today were Christians trying to understand God. You know, we believe that you can't be a Christian just on Sunday morning. That's a 24/7, 365 affair, and a biblical worldview, a Christ-centered worldview should be how we live our lives. And I think, you know, we see these identity issues in our culture today. Well, if you've been told your entire 12, 16, 20 years of education that you've evolved from pond scum, well, of course, we're going to have identity issues in our society. And, one of the things that science used to be privately funded, and then now it's publicly funded. And we see just how corrupt it's really become over the last couple years, over the last 20 years. And of course, they're talking about socializing the capitalist side of medicine. It's like, well, if the government paid for its development, I mean, I can understand why it would make sense to socialize the selling and marketing and all of those things, because that's the path that you put us on when you said the government should start funding these things. And I just mentioned that because I want to talk about the biggest fight I think that we're in right now. It's, again, of course, we've talked about this before. You can go check out my interview with Israel Wayne, the first time I interviewed him, on this idea of school choice. And I think both of us are for, or maybe not, but, school choice in the sense of parents should be able to decide, the type of education that we want to give our children. It shouldn't be a one world government, but whoever pays for it ultimately gets the final decision on what that education is going to look like. So, just for our audience, we're talking about government-funded school choice. So why are you against school choice, and why have conservatives had their wool pulled over their heads yet again?
Okay, excellent question. Well, the reason why I'm against school choice as it's being spun is, first of all, and you've pretty much hinted at it, and that is the more subsidized it is, the more controlled that it is, and that's the danger. If we wanted school choice, we never should have passed the Every Student Succeeds Act, because that one mandate that I've already quoted, where all education has to be the same, wiped out true choice. If you wanted parents to be able to choose where their child goes, don't sit there and have the parent go, well, I'm going to pay my taxes in, and then I'm going to sit here and wait with my hand out, and I'm going to get a tax credit or an education voucher or a Freedom Scholarship or any of the other names that they have been given across the nation. Because what happens is you've just given the money that was yours to a government. They're handing it back to you with so many strings that you may or may not see, that you don't think, oh, this is going to strap me into this one world curriculum and this one way to learn and this one way to test, because that's precisely what happens. The other thing that goes on about school choice that people do not realize and have not seen coming, and that is, in our Constitution, we have been given the guarantee of representative government, and our taxes and our votes are supposed to tie to those. If we take tax money and we manipulate it back to the families, we're messing with that representation. And when the entire goal that has been published in a 1994 research manual for America 2000, or the Goals 2000, said that the vouchers and tax credits, or the education savings accounts, or freedom scholarships, was a tool that was created well before 1994, probably the 80s, I believe it was, that was made by the New American Education Corporation as well as the U.S. Department of Education. This was a tool. Now, our GOP is latching onto this like the greatest thing since sliced bread, because back in 2020, who did they trot out on Fox News but Betsy DeVos? And what was she pushing? Educational school choice. parents' rights tied to that. Well, that's going to be a whole nother conversation because the parental rights is being misrepresented again through our government. But when you take the sheer knowledge that the GOP stated before God and everyone, they were going to use school choice as the one issue to drive and sway the 2024 election. I mean, I've got it on tape. I've done a complete 4-set broadcast on it where you can see it's not everything it was set out to be. When you've got a political party that is willingly telling you, we're going to do everything we can to blow up a false issue to make it make the election go our way, that's a big problem. But here's the thing, it's not just the conservatives. The liberals are after this too, because after all, if you use school choice and the money tied to it, you're going to save your child from this terrible zip-coded school. They're playing both ends of the political spectrum against we the people. So when we realize that what's really at stake is not only our family freedom and our parental voice in that freedom, but our total representative form of government, we should all be absolutely holding these officials accountable. What are you doing? You cannot take my right to vote away. You cannot take my representative form of government away. But that is the end game goal, because we have to be a good democratic member state of the United Nations. And if we have representative government, Robert, we can't be a good member state.
Yeah. So let's go back real quick to the UN, because the UN is actually, that's my understanding from some things I've seen is they've actually got school choice as a mechanism for controlling private schools in documented via, you can verify this on their websites. So to talk about like what are they saying about their purpose of school choice at the United Nations?
Well, the entire goal, again, is total state control. Now, not say North Carolina versus Virginia state. We're talking about a nanny state, okay? A state of being. So their take on it is that, oh, yes, we're going to snow you with the fact that you have school choice. But what happens is you don't really have the choice at all. If you did, the only thing would be the location. What's taught, how it's taught will not be different. And one of the ways that this has infiltrated is because we're being told, oh, well, you'll gain more freedom. Robert, we cannot gain any more than 100%. And if we already have 100%, Common Core math is going to tell you, oh, yeah, you could come in and have way more than 100% freedom, but it's impossible. You absolutely cannot do it.
Well, what about the people who say, well, I'm going to take the money now because there's no strings attached, but if they become strings attached, I'm going to walk away from it? Like, why is that historically not an accurate prediction of your future behavior?
Because if you go back and you look at when school choice and government money was first doled out, it was to the state of Alaska, and it was to reach the home education population, because after all, in Alaska, it gets really cold and maybe you can't get down to the local schoolhouse. It makes sense from that perspective. But when the homeschooling families started taking this money because they were told, oh, well, it will help Johnny and Susie get clarinet lessons, or they can go skating, or they can take art, or whatever you want to do, you can do it because it's educationally responsible and fiscal. Well, what happened was these families started getting the money and they're thinking, oh, goody, we could go spend this on what we need to augment our homeschool. And then they would get in the mail 800 plus pages of curriculum that came with the money. And it was that not only do you have to try to incorporate this into your homeschooling, this should start replacing your homeschooling. So there was one of our earliest signs is why subsidized money for any type of education doesn't work. Go look at Arizona. When they started, people have manipulated the system. They went out and started buying cars and putting down payments on houses and claiming it as educational related. Well, guess what? They got caught. They got punished, and they had to pay the money back. So if you take the attitude of, oh, I'm going to take it now, and then when the strings hit the fan, I'll let it go. No, honey, you're already in their data system. And once you're in that data system, you are the cash cow that they will feed upon.
No, some people say, well, what about poor people? Don't we need to help them?
Okay. If you look at the way poor people have been treated in this nation, it is horrid. When you look at some of the ways that certain populations have been treated, it's been absolutely horrid. But the problem is, it's because the government is solving what is supposed to be a scriptural church based issue. Jesus told us you would always have the poor with you. He said we would always have poor people among us. And one of the great things about our nation, up until this recent mess of us being globalized, is that we recognized we had different stations in life. And okay, so maybe I wasn't as rich as my neighbor down the street, but richness is not just in dollars, it is in how you're living your life, the quality of your life. And what we're seeing in the education system, especially the United Nations, is stressing money, not quality of life. And that's a big difference.
No, and I agree, and I think that's probably one of the biggest things is that I believe that God set up the realm of family, the realm of church, and the realm of government, and He gave them each responsibilities. And the government was mostly dealt with justice and some protection, and the family was governed by most everything else, and then the church has its role. But anytime the government takes responsibility for something that God hasn't ordained it to do, it gets very expensive and the quality goes way, 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 way down. And
It absolutely does. But if I could, just real quick, one of the things that you'd asked me to prepare was from my article, The ABCs of School Choice Lies.
yeah,
You asked me to pick out some that parents might really need to know. All right. D, it actually increases America's debt load. It does not lessen it. G, gives a false hope, as we have just laid out. M, it misrepresents our constitutional authority, because if you go and you look at our Constitution, federal government was never supposed to be connected to education in any form or any level. And then finally, W, will destroy our representative government. And that is, to me, besides the family, that's probably one of the biggest things I think, Robert, that people need to understand is this is way more than just talking about where your child goes to school.
Now, you've mentioned destroying the representative government. Can you just unpack that a little bit more for us? Like, how does school choice ultimately lead to this destruction?
Okay. From my one-page primer that I can send to anyone who's interested, this is under the section called Money Has Powerful Strings. The money tied to school choice is given to you by the state. It's not as free to use any way you please as you are being led to believe, because technocrats, leftists, neoconservatives, progressive socialists, conservatives, and corporations, along with U.S. government, have united in education to international solidarity under the United Nations. And as such, representative forms of government, which are secured by our tax dollars and elections, will become obsolete. Thus, your right to vote is being slowly removed. The strings are sacrificing your children's freedoms along with yours to get a subsidized income in some form. And the more subsidized your children's education becomes, the less choice you have in their life.
So they'll let us vote, but it won't really matter because we'll all be voting for the.
And that should scare people into action, not just shock and horror. No, this is one of the things that we need to do as a united front, as a parental group, as a church, as a population out there who loves our God and loves our nation, is that we should be looking at what the bigger picture is, helping get this information out there so that people can know when they go to the polls that this is what's at stake. And we cannot lose our representative form of government because all will be lost.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today. And yeah, we'll definitely have the link. But can you tell people how to connect with you? I know we chat on X, formerly known as Twitter. You have your commoncorediva.com, but let the audience know where they can learn more about this wonderful research you've put together.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Robert. It's commoncorediva.com. If you wish to schedule me to come speak, it's info@commoncorediva.com. If you have questions for me, use that same email address. You can find me on X as Common Core Diva, or excuse me, at Common Core Diva. I'm on Facebook under Common Core Diva 2023 because Facebook decided to shut my years old one down. So I just said, you know what, phooey on you, I'll open up a new one. But as far as on the website, if you go to the donate tab and you scroll down, you should see info kits. This will get you not only my one-page primer on the overview of school choice that we've been told lies about. You can get bumper stickers, online resources that come with the toolkits as well, because we have to get out there and inform not only our candidates, but our voters.
Well, thank you so much, Lynn. And I know as I've had conversation with elected officials and different people pushing school choice and bring these ideas up to them, like, we've never heard these before. And I've had people say, I'm not going to support this anymore. I'm going to take it off my website. So it's really, like you said, we had a big push to win elections, and people say it's popular. It's like, well, yeah, giving away other people's money that you didn't earn to you is typically popular, because I didn't have to work for it. My neighbors did. And ultimately, I think that will corrupt our schools and our souls.
Right, absolutely. But think about this, the age-old saying, if 50 million people believe a fallacy, guess what? It's still a fallacy. And that's what we're seeing happen with this one political issue. So, yeah, have folks get in touch with me. I will be happy to go anywhere, speak about this, because we're talking really basic American freedom at stake.
Well, thank you so much, Lynn, the Common Core Diva, for coming on to talk about school choice and how the UN is really using this issue and the GOP to really push their own agenda, not the agenda of families, not the agenda of Americans, but this idea from afar that has infiltrated us because we all like free things. Well, I really appreciate Lynn being on the show today, and I definitely encourage you to check out Common Core Diva. Also, if you go to the Classical Conversations YouTube page, you can hear more about school choice in my video, Why I'm Giving Up $1 Billion. That's a B, $billion, and really breaks down some of the behind-the-scenes experiences I've had with those pushing school choice and trying to expose what's really going on. So be sure to check that out. Educate yourself, educate your elected officials, and check out the next episode of Refining Rhetoric next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortons. Want more? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media to continue the conversation, and visit classicalconversations.com/rhetoric to find out how you can join a local homeschool community.